Oh, there it is. There it is, StreamYard. All right, we let it count up a little bit. We let it count up a little bit ago, and we go live. 3, 2, 1. Who are we thankful for this year in fantasy football? That and more this week on the couch. Bob Harris, who are you thankful for?
Well, besides you, Sigmund Bloom, because
Always,
you make the world go round. I'm successful for. I appreciate some of the guys who I paid highly for who came through. Right. I mean, like today, I put out on Twitter. I saw Philip Lindsay get released, and I said, my free square player is now free. Right. I mean, and we all have a bunch of those guys that we all draft late, but you need some of the early picks to come through. And to the point, I was very thankful for Derrick Henry and hoping for the best for his recovery. But I mean, he was crushing it. The investment in him was paying off. I felt like, huge dividends, exactly what I expected. And I do think he's kind of a different cat, a different breed.
Yeah.
Back. Everyone, worried about the workload. Well, yes, he got hurt. So you're all right. The workload did him in. Or not. I mean, right. I just say, we can all go with our narrative, but he was holding up that workload pretty well, and anyone can get hurt at any given play. But beyond that, some of the running backs, Jonathan Taylor obviously carrying over that late season run. Took him a little while to build up his momentum, but I'm thankful he's hit stride. Thankful Najee Harris is everything everyone said he would be. Thankful some of the quarterbacks I invested in maybe a little more, earlier than I should have, are okay, but more thankful that the Tom Brady's of the world, the mid-level quarterbacks that I really was hoping for, would come through, are coming through. At wide receiver, I'm just thankful that I didn't overpay for Julio Jones. I guess that's, or and not to make light of the Calvin Ridley situation, but the rise. I mean, there's just thankful for some good fortune and missing guys that I was just drafting different players when they're going. So much to be thankful for, and truly thankful for the chance for Dan Arnold to emerge until last week is everything I knew he would.
Right. There's so much fun stuff to sift through here. And, we're at that milestone on the calendar, Thanksgiving, as we make that nod to open the show, where we really can start to look back. And I think every time I do this, Bob, every time I do this exercise, and I feel like we never properly do it at the end of the season, and I just never have the time or energy to do it at the end of the season. But if we just look back at what the range of narratives were on players in August, and we see where they landed, and it's not even like they land on one spot on the range, because they end up in jumping between different spots depending on surrounding factors, injuries, who knows what.
Right.
But when we reflect, rarely does it match what we expected. Rarely does it match what anybody expected. And we never also, Bob, we also project these monolithic, like linear paths for players. Nothing's linear in the NFL.
No,
nothing at all is linear in the NFL.
Nothing is black or white. I mean, in the entirety of life, right? And we want to leave all the nuance out and all the gray areas. We want it this or that, right? And that's part of the thing with Henry. I mean, you come in, he's going to get hurt. He doesn't have too big of a workload. Well, I've grilled every single person I've talked to who covered the Tennessee Titans, and I have talked to a number of them. So is this like something, in your estimation, is this like, is he a different guy? Is he like not taking the punishment? I mean, we heard it from Eddie George, who basically said the same thing. And every reporter told me the same thing, is he's a little different person. He knows how to take care of himself. He does all these things. He's built for the workload. Obviously, he delivers more punishment than he takes. I think that's a big key. But, we come in with these narratives that we want to stick to. And we should do a show after the season, Sig. To see the narrative explosion theme, and we should have explosives. I think that'd be
cool. There we go. At the end, do like a finale rack of fireworks. No, but it's one of those things where I like to say we are right and wrong in the same season. Often, and we can be right for the wrong reasons and wrong for the right reasons. We can have certain parts of a situation ascertained perfectly, but one key part. And the thing is, you can't apply this kind of analysis across all 32 teams, because different teams have different critical points of failure, or different points where they're multipliers and everything takes off. And it gets in alignment for a couple of weeks, and then it gets out of alignment for a couple of weeks, or maybe different opponents allow it to get in alignment and different opponents disrupt it. And week to week, we're just, more than any other year, Bob, we're just adrift in the ocean, in the waves of the NFL.
It's funny you say that, because I often think of these things. I'll say, wow, this is the most volatile season ever. I think, I should probably check that right after the season and see if it really was the most volatile season ever. I do think, though, this is like what the NFL has designed itself to be, is what it is, right? Any given Sunday has truly, a thing. And, you need to look back no further than the last couple of weeks, right, to see the evidence of this. So they're getting what they want, which is why I'm always interested, in teams or owners that are that have an interest in breaking that, right? Breaking the system. David Tepper being one that comes to mind. He doesn't want, number one, he got to where he got by gambling, right? And number two, he's, in taking risks, and he doesn't want to be an 8-8 team, or not 8-8 anymore, but a 500 team, right?
Right.
And so, I mean, I look for teams like that to make some moves over the course of time and see what happens. But for the most part, it's become, remember when I used to say September is the new August, and
right.
I mean it's November and it still seems like it's August, right? I mean, trying to come up with the, some predictability, and I mean there is some, and I'm overstating the case to make the point, but it has been crazy, and it makes fantasy football interesting and difficult.
Yeah, well, it makes it seem kind of senseless, but that's okay, because the actual kernel or nugget at the center of fantasy football is just engagement. It's just human engagement and stimulation and a puzzle or a contest. But really, it's just to hang out like we are right now, making time during the busiest week. This is the busiest week in the fantasy football calendar because we all have to do our whole week of work in 3 days. So it's really special. This is like golden time, Bob. But yeah, and in addition to what you said, we're just stuck in perpetual August. We're stuck in perpetually just learning things and trying to assimilate them into our understanding and then react appropriately, and then getting jarred again the next week and trying to, what do I learn from that? And how can I predict the next week, and getting jarred by that. And every now and then the outcomes match our expectations, but not enough to make us feel like we're getting a handle on this. And then you have the whole you can't step in the same river twice, because there is something to be said for later in the season, team getting more tired. I mean, look at the Eagles. The hottest team in the league is a team that said, we're just going to run the ball forever and ever and ever. They're the hottest team in the league right now, So maybe things get simpler as the season goes on. But I want to touch on a couple of things you said. Number one, 8-8. And I have a theory that by changing from a 16 to a 17 game season, that's where the volatility comes in, because 16 is a square number, Bob. 16 is perfectly divisible, right? 16, 8, 4, 2, 1, 8 and 8, all these things will just roll off the tongue because it has a certain symmetry to it. 17 is a prime number. 17 is not a divisible number at all. So it just adds all this volatility. That's just my numerology take. I like that you mentioned David Tepper and trying to break things. We're going to talk about Cam Newton, but I want to circle back to Derrick Henry really quick, because there is this idea first it looked like Derrick Henry was if you drafted this player, you're going to win your league or go to the final. It was actually Jonathan Taylor. Anyway, who's the next Derrick Henry, right? He channels that Derrick Henry energy. Actually, the whole indie running game is channeling that right now. Frank Reich's running game, he's doing a master class in a running game right now. Ask the Bills. Broke their will in that game. But it's like in the movie, Bob, Derrick Henry, he pulls your team that far. If you have Derrick Henry, you got a good head start to just get in the playoffs. And then it's carry on without me. And this year in fantasy football, more than any other year, it really is going to be just like the NFL is going to be, a war of attrition and surviving and having the will and desire to keep pushing forward against adversity. And this year, like you said, it's what the NFL wants. A team that gets hot, gets their formula right, gets some key pieces going in January. Every team that makes the playoffs probably thinks, yeah, we can win the Super Bowl, and they probably can.
Yeah, and you think about what you said about Philadelphia, the running teams that are getting hot, and Indianapolis, and what the Titans were doing with Derrick Henry, and it strikes me as I watch teams that want to be pass heavy. There's some key components there that you have to have. According to Chicago Bears, it'd be great to have some offensive tackles. And
the Saints. And
the Saints. And not everybody has those. And when you lose those, and we'll see what the Green Bay Packers do. David Bakhtiari now, I think he had had his knee scoped so he could maybe come back. But I mean, they're going to have to battle through that this coming week with a gimpy quarterback going in. Mm-hmm. But run blocking is easier than pass protection.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you can, and I mean,
more fun too.
Right. And I talked to Ted Sutton. I said, man, the thing you can't replace in the NFL is offensive tackles. I mean, you can't go pluck a guy off the tractor out in the farmlands and just because he's a big guy throwing around bales of hay and throw him in there. I mean, it has a requirements and skills that are necessary. And and those guys just don't grow on trees. So I think this is a key. I think being able to run the ball in this lengthier season, which at some point will probably only get lengthier, right? There's money to be made. So, so I think this is going to be a key, and I think we are seeing it over and over. The teams that are starting to run, San Francisco has gone back, to set the way back controls to 2019. We are running the damn ball, and so maybe we'll see even more of that going forward. I'd love it.
Yeah, and it's something that factors in different levels. Obviously, you apply it differently on different teams to all of our fantasy analysis. Okay, let's get specific. We're going to get big picture, and we'll go off the rails and do all that stuff. But let's get specific. True or false? Cam Newton is going to be an every week fantasy starter from here on out.
Stop me from doing this, Sigmund. True.
No,
totally true.
I'm not.
Totally true.
I am not the person to ask to stop anything.
So I've been I've been overly exuberant, I think, about this entire reunion just because it makes so much sense, right? And look, I mean, Cam Newton is not the quarterback he once was, but Cam Newton is a big physical player who's capable of running the ball well, has experience playing the game.
With these players in
this thing. So expecting him to, throw the ball deep is not something we should do. We haven't seen that since it's been 4 years since the shoulder surgery, right? And I think we've seen one game, week 2 against Seattle last year, where he actually
always have week 2 against Seattle.
We'll have that,
beautiful game.
That's
the sunset.
We just enjoy that and hold it dear because he's not going to be that guy. But does he need to be that guy when you have, the Christian McCaffreys and the DJ Moores? I mean, basically, essentially, I don't want to, he's a running back that plays wide receiver, right?
Sure.
He can, the run after the catch ability. He can make big plays and go deep, but he's not going to because Cam's struggling with the ball. So I think there's some good pieces there. The coaching staff will make some necessary adjustments, but I think we saw some of those. And I loved his comment after the Arizona game. How much of the playbook did you know? 2 touchdowns worth. Right. Yeah. And but you look at those plays, right? They were those high leverage plays where they just asked him to be Cam Newton, take a step to the side, run it in. If you see something open, throw it 2 yards and thinking, expecting Christian McCaffrey to be able to carry that offense up and down the field to the inside the 10-yard line on a regular basis doesn't seem like a huge reach to me. So, yeah, I think he will be a quarterback one. All that to say that.
And the quarterback 1 bar is lower this year, too.
It is.
That's the other thing. Dak Prescott, Patrick Mahomes. What do you have if you have those guys right now? What do you have if you have Matthew Stafford? Like you said, Tom Brady's good. Josh Allen is worth ups and downs. He's good. Yeah. So the point is, Cam Newton, if he can account for a couple of touchdowns a week, and he looks like he's just going to get more and more comfortable. And by the way, you mentioned what he said after the Arizona game. I'd love to when he said he was talking to the team about Moses. He said, "Where are we?"
This all goes back to the Rich Rebar Konami Code quarterback thing, right? I mean,
sure.
When you have that Jalen Hurts, right? I mean, when you have that guy, and look, I'm going to throw another guy into the mix right now so a development that I felt like, and I don't want to hurt you or anything, but I'm going to bring up the Steelers game.
No, please do.
So, I mean, Justin Herbert, it got off to a great start this season, right? It was very impressive. Yins on, Sig. So it got off to a great start. And there are teams obviously Miami, that wish they had, looked more closely at this guy. And I wonder why he wasn't higher up the draft radar. I suspect it's because he's a quiet person off the field and maybe not the alpha off field guy. And then when you throw him on the water and add turf, instant alpha, right? But you look at him as a runner, a passer, the aggression he plays with. I just think he looks like the kind of quarterback that is going to be a dominant force for years to come. The size and all the things he does. But these are the quarterbacks we're going to want to play. And I think Josh Allen is probably one of them as well.
Yeah.
And Patrick Mahomes is always going to be fantastic. But it's a narrow band that are those guys that can take on the passing game and the rushing game. And we'll see where this goes, what the evolution takes us, but maybe it leads to more running just in general, based on what we've seen from the Eagles. That may be the case.
Yeah. It's amazing to watch that Eagles transformation, just like everybody had it, Bob. Once they really committed to the run and brought Jordan Howard back into the mix, everything would be fine. And actually, after a little bit of turbulence, now Jalen Hurts' fantasy stock is really taking off. He's reaching peaks he wasn't reaching when they were going pass first. Go ahead.
I think people are, now a little more convinced that he is the quarterback, right? I think that was the first part of the season was everyone's going, this guy isn't the guy Nick Sirianni wants, all these things. And it turns out Nick Sirianni realized it's the guy he has, and he better figure something out. And part of that figuring things out is letting him run.
Yeah. Well, letting him run. And to me, it made sense, Bob, in part because the thing about defending Jalen Hurts is you want to keep him in the pocket. You want to keep him in the pocket thinking and making decisions as a passer. And as a defense, you want to play in a more passive mode because you don't really think he's going to throw the ball over you. You're just going to keep everything in front of you. And that passive mode to contain him as a runner, which that's the main threat, is actually an excellent mode to attack with a downhill running game with the offensive line that they have. And it's going really well. And it's an interesting trajectory to trace because this team was miserable. Like you said, is Jalen Hurts even their quarterback a month ago? Is Jalen Hurts even their quarterback? Now you have a team that has an identity on offense. Nick Sirianni, first year as a head coach. You have a team that can look at Jalen Hurts and a quarterback poor draft coming up and say, okay, we can build around this with 3 first-round picks. We're getting close to, I brought this up earlier in the week, Bob. We're getting close to the threshold where it doesn't matter if Carson Wentz gets hurt. Where he, once we get to week 14, that's locked in as a first-round pick. He's with, a couple of snaps, right? Jacob Eason gets in to throw an interception against the Rams. The Colts are another team, by the way. What's the common piece here? Run the ball. You can't stop us. Demoralizing your opponent. The Saints had the #1 rush defense in the league going into that game. So you look at a team like the Colts or the Eagles, and you think, if they can get into the playoffs, why can't they run the table? In a year like this, it's exciting, but it's also disorienting, even like nauseating. I want to ask you about another quarterback that doesn't give the Konami code, but is a quarterback that I look, Bob, and it's kind of like you see the possible futures, and I can't quite figure out what is coming up for Aaron Rodgers. Okay. Mm-hmm. You heard him after the game, I'm sure you did, saying this is worse than turf toe. Mm-hmm. He said, I've had turf toe. This is worse than turf toe. I asked Dr. Gene about that. That doesn't sound good. He said he's just trying to make it to the bye.
Yep. He's
in a lot of pain. He's just trying to make the bye. Now he's playing magnificent maestro level football with a foot that, if you listen to him, is falling apart. What's coming up here, Bob?
So I don't know. So there's all kinds of thoughts running through my head. Was like when I started hearing these reports Sunday, I'm going, why am I hearing these? Right? What is the purpose of this? And clearly, I mean, it's being put out by one person, right? Who would like us all to pay attention to his toe. I mean, there could be any number of reasons he just wants us to pay attention to his toe. I'm just saying, but like watching him play. So I watched that entire game just to, closely just to see it. I didn't see a lot of, I didn't see him hindered greatly by his toe. Right. So, I don't know. Call me skeptical. I don't think it's, not an issue. I'm sure it is an issue. I'm just wondering how big an issue. Obviously, you would like to see him on the practice field. I think maybe that's the biggest issue for a guy who hasn't been around for a couple of weeks. I think he had 15 snaps last Friday of practice for the first, real practice he had. And, that's obviously not ideal, but also he's been playing with some of these guys for quite a while. I don't know that he really needs to sit there and, dial in his passes. I mean, I'm sure it would be the best case thing, but I don't know. I think we tend to get really excited about some things that maybe we shouldn't get as excited about. I'm more worried about his offensive line than I am about him now until we see evidence and maybe he takes off to make a run and just pushes off on that bad toe and boom, that's it. That's the last we see him for a while. It's entirely possible. And the good news is there was so much uncertainty. No one overpaid for him in drafts this year.
Right. And so, you can invoke Patrick Mahomes last year in the playoffs. It's a toe thing. And then the next thing like again, with the offensive line, and you're right to bring that up as a potential fatal nexus. If he's less mobile and behind an offensive line, Eldon Jenkins, very valuable player. And Bakhtiari, like you said, it comes out that he has another procedure. We'll see. And again, in the backdrop of Last Dance, remember that narrative, Last Dance and all that good stuff. Well, I mean, they really can entertain winning the Super Bowl. Why not? Sure. There's no team, any team that can make the playoffs. And look, if you're 4-6 right now, you can still make the playoffs. Any team that makes the playoffs can string together 4 wins in this NFL, which is exciting. It's something we're going to look forward to. Things we're not going to look forward to, teams that aren't going to make the playoffs, the Giants in Chicago making some changes today. So let's talk some timely stuff, Bob.
All right.
Jason Garrett. Okay, let's start with Jason Garrett. And right, it's terrible, Bob. It's terrible because it's one of those things where you almost want to say that what do they say, like smother the baby in the crib or something like that with this move.
See, you're late.
Right? Like they never should have hired him.
Right.
I mean, everybody knew that.
Well, so I mean, I kind of get the hire, right? I mean, you're bringing in this young coach that maybe ownership or management wanted somebody around familiar to help this young coach, acclimate and the person who's played for the team. I mean, I get it. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand why they did it. But maybe when they fired his buddy Colombo last year.
Exactly.
That maybe the writing was on the wall and they should have just made a clean cut at that point. Because it clearly hasn't been working. It's been some, I don't want to say dysfunctional because I don't know what the relationships are or anything, but the beyond the field product has been dysfunctional.
Discordant, right? It's funny, Bob. Sometimes I think that we can perceive it, but we don't understand what it is that's the cause. That it's when a team feels disjointed or incoherent, it's because of that dissension, right? Who's actually got the steering wheel? Right. There does have to be some sort of organizational clarity. You're absolutely right that when Colombo goes, that's a sign that there's some sort of rift. I don't know exactly who the rift was in between, but it wasn't like Jason Garrett. What's funny to me about these kinds of things, Bob, is what was different about that performance last night than any one of like 15 performances that this offense has put up. And why is that the one to say, oh, yeah, this isn't going to work? We could all see that this isn't going to work.
It was on TV and we watched. I don't know. I've seen a number.
I don't know. But there's hope, maybe like the dead cat bounce, for this offense. But I don't know. I mean, you're still going to keep playing quickly. You're still. I mean, Kadarius Toney. We can see if we can get a lifeline going here.
I'm still chasing that 190-yard game, 189-yard game.
Sure, the big 78-yard touchdown. And then the Kenny Golladay thing, again, this is the discord, right? This is the nails on a chalkboard. How can you go out and spend this kind of money for Kenny Golladay and not make him foundational in the offense?
How many people, when that move was made, said, I don't understand this move?
Yeah.
Right? And I mean, that's part of it as well. I mean, they just paid Sterling Shepard to be their wide receiver one when they traded away Odell Beckham, right? And so, is he, I mean, and I get it. Maybe he's not that guy, but to bring in another guy who doesn't seem to be a great fit and doesn't have a great history, I don't know. It doesn't make a ton of sense. So, yes, we're talking to you, Dave Gettleman.
Well, it's poor it's incoherence. It's poor self-scouting. I mean, there's a real simple proposition that's like Kenny Golladay, Matthew Stafford. This is the kind of quarterback and this is the kind of offensive approach that he can create value in. And there's just no will. I don't feel like there's even any will to try to come up with something. If that's not working, let's try a plan B, but let's continue to try to leverage the guy we thought was worth top of the market money. So there's that disjointedness. Okay. Speaking of investments, you mentioned the investment in Sterling Shepard. Before we talk about Chicago, I want to ask you about Denver because that was another big news this week, right?
Yeah.
It was fascinating how it went down too. And George Payton, let's be clear, folks. George Payton was one of the golden child GM candidates, right? He could have picked his job, basically. And he picked the Denver job. And look at what they've done, right? They draft Noah Fant. Now, Payton isn't responsible for all these moves, but they draft Jerry Jeudy. They draft KJ Hamler. They had drafted Sutton in the second round, and now they extend him. And interestingly enough, they extend Tim Hatrick, an undrafted player, before they extend Sutton. But you have a first-round pick, a second-round pick, and a first-round pick. And I think Patrick's getting solid number 2 money, and Sutton's getting solid number 1 money. So you've built this structure, but you need the quarterback. We all want to play fantasy football with this, Bob. We want to put Russell Wilson there. We want to put Aaron Rodgers there. However, based on your sage experience watching this, are we really in a fantasy, or do you think that Denver is going to be able to get a quarterback next year to unlock all this?
So I think Tom Brady has changed the dynamic of how people look at what a quarterback is and where he lives and where he plays and things like that. Tom Brady is, well, maybe not people. I should have rephrased that. Tom Brady has changed the way quarterbacks look at the way quarterbacks are treated, right, in the league, right, and how things work. And they're not, Russell Wilson's not going to take this nonsense much longer, right? Aaron Rodgers has had enough of that nonsense, and I'm sure there will be others. I don't know, all of them will have the kind of leverage that Tom Brady or those two would have, right? So, but they're going to force some issues here going forward, and part of that is going to be the kind of the kind of say in things that Tom Brady has, and by say I mean being in charge, right? Yeah. And so Russell Wilson, I don't know that he hasn't earned that right at this point in his career. And I would say the same of Aaron Rodgers. Yeah. I don't know that I'd want to bank on, I don't know if either of them are players I would want to bank on, or I'd want to give that control over my team. But quarterbacks are rare commodities, and it wouldn't surprise me if Denver, that's their only play, right? They're not going to draft somebody. Teddy Bridgewater isn't going to turn into that guy. Drew Lock is not going to develop into that guy. No. So this seems to be the direction this is heading. And we're leaving Deshaun Watson out of this conversation, who is also forcing his way. And that would be the logical, for Denver in my estimation. But there's a lot of things to work through with him. Not the least, and none of it being on field. And so that just makes it super complicated. And they'll have to deal with that. And don't forget the man I mentioned before, David Tepper. I don't know that he's done either. And, if there's going to be, if something's going to happen with Deshaun Watson, whether, Miami gets involved or whoever, I don't think you should ever rule Tepper out of this thing, because he's not the same as these other guys.
No. And it's in between week 11 and week 12. So looking ahead to this
something
stuff.
Also on Denver, they don't really have ownership right now, right?
No, that's the thing, right? Seattle too, right?
Seattle doesn't either. They have like a consortium, that's basically run by Pete Carroll and John Schneider, right? So a totally hands-off ownership situation.
Yeah,
but you can see this go. There's not a I talked to Michael Sean Dugar on occasion from who covers the Seattle Athletic, and he said both of these guys are not going to be here beyond this year. Both of them can't coexist.
Both of who?
Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll, right?
Yeah.
And so is Pete Carroll really in charge of the organization? Is he the one who's going, or is Russell Wilson going to be the one who goes? I think Russell Wilson would like to be the one who goes.
Of course. Well, it's funny too, seeing, I think it was Allen Robinson's agent, whenever Odell Beckham got released, saying, was that easy? Again, you bring up a theme that is going to suffuse this stuff going forward, which is player empowerment and changing the picture, the organizational power chart of where decisions get made. Go ahead.
Well, so having, part of this that works in the favor of the players is Tom Brady's success, right? Mm-hmm. Tom Brady shows up on another team, they do what he tells them, and they win a Super Bowl.
Yeah,
this is an alluring thing, right? If you think you can do that, I don't know. If I look at the Dolphins ownership, I think that fellow would give up a lot. Some of these guys are getting old, right? And so they're not. The patience is not going to be the thing that's going to dictate their approach.
Yeah, it's so fascinating, Bob. And again, we're between week 11 and week 12. We're talking to an audience that is fantasy football driven, but it's fun to already look ahead to the offseason and Rodgers and Wilson, and you have Watson, and then that could implicate Tua. There's the Baker Mayfield decision. What's going to happen with Matt Ryan? There's a lot of interesting situations here that could all be interconnected and affect each other's outcomes. And then, like you said, you're also looking at ownership's motivations, or a lack of ownership. Does that make it easier to make a big move if there's no ownership?
Right.
Or need ownership to push to make it happen.
So I think the Teppers and Stephen Rosses of the world are guys that will make things happen.
Exactly.
Right? They're not going to be, there's not going to be patience. There's not going to be any confusion at the top. There's not going to be people, trying to figure out, who do I have to ask, who grants permission. They're going to be, it's going to be the people who are forcing the issues. And those are those two in particular are the kind of people who will force the issue.
Yeah, and on this occasion too, in Miami, there's also a decision, one might argue, be made about Brian Flores, which implicates a lot of other things. But on that note, the Chicago Bears apparently, and you can chime in on whether you think we should believe this, apparently this is going to be the last game that Matt Nagy is going to coach. The reason it's so believable is we've all thought he should have been fired since last year.
Right, that's the only reason it's believable.
Right, so it's just like we've just been waiting for this news. This is the other shoe dropping. Another one like the Jason Garrett, where any outward indications showed that this person should have been fired, relieved of their duties a long time ago. But do you think there's a ding dong, the witch is dead potential for this offense, for Justin Fields, for this team? How much do you think we'll see, at least in the short term, that Nagy was holding this team back?
I've been following the Bears now for all my 500 years, and they've never fired a coach. They've never fired a coach
in mid-season. I know, right?
Right. So I don't know. That seems like it would go against character, but it would be great if they did. I mean, I would love to see them. I mean, you don't want to see anyone fired. That's horrible of me. But if somebody needed to get fired, it might be him. So
Sure.
So I don't know if it forwards the goal though, right? I mean, that's my only problem with making moves like this at this time. It's a reactionary move. It's not a move that's taking you anywhere forward. I mean, you're not going anywhere now. So, okay, I'm going to get rid of this guy. And I'm going to put in a temporary guy, and we're just going to go through the motions the rest of the season. Okay, yeah, you can go through the motions with whoever you want. I'm fine with that. Nothing about this is good for Justin Fields. Nothing about this is good for fantasy players, right? I don't think, someone coming in, maybe catching lightning in a bottle for a week or two until people figure out what the hell they're doing. Their big problems are still going to remain unchanged. They don't have the offensive line. They don't have the personnel necessary to succeed at the pro level. And until they change that, and like, I'm fine saying Ryan Pace, you should be gone.
Yeah.
Because I've said that, and he should be. But they got another chance, right? They got another bite at the apple with Justin Fields, and hopefully they don't, spoil the apple or however you want to phrase that. But I'm not as big as like, okay, you're ruining this quarterback by playing him or whatever. I don't think you're ruining him. I think quarterbacks have been ruined, but I think that's as much on the quarterback as it is on the team and the circumstances that you have to battle through these things. You look at what Trevor Lawrence is dealing with right now. I mean, it's not good. Do I think that's ruining him? No, I don't think it's ruining him. I think it's like either going to toughen him up or, he's not going to fare well under it. So they need to get better around him, though. He is not the problem there, right? They've got to get pieces around him. Justin Fields isn't a problem in Chicago. They've got to get better pieces around him.
You're right. But I continue to come back to this Freudian thing. I think it was when Eric Stoner was on, Bob, that I compared it to like childhood and childhood trauma. We're in therapy. We're on the couch, right? So let's make it topical. And there is an idea, you're right, that the child needs to be resilient, or the child needs to come up with tactics and coping mechanisms to get through the trauma. But the parents, the team, also have a duty to try to shield them from trauma as much as possible, and certainly not foist trauma upon them.
Right.
Right. Like,
yes.
Like David Carr, or where we
right.
from Zach Wilson early. That's a real riddle, right? The Jets offense looks totally dysfunctional, and you take Zach Wilson out and you put with Josh Johnson, Joe Flacco, Mike White, and they're all making this offense at different points work, at least make it look like a functional NFL offense where Zach Wilson couldn't. Maybe it was too early. Maybe it was too much of a leap from what he was doing in the defenses he was facing and the kind of football he could play and get away with. Go ahead.
Or maybe he just needed to take a step back and see how other people might do it and maybe learn something from that instead of saying, oh, my way is the only way. Also, this might be a generational thing. I was taught to swim by being thrown in a pool and having my grandfather walk away, right? I mean, this is and we don't do things the same way these days, and it's probably for the best. I mean, I didn't drown, but probably others did. I don't know.
There's wisdom from all of it. You're right. It's so funny. This is echoing conversations. Go ahead.
But so I do think, these, I mean, look, if you're going to be an NFL quarterback, you better, have this kind of mental toughness and resilience. And I'm not saying that it helps get your ass beat, because I don't think it does. Sorry, Joe. But
nice.
but it probably, but I mean, in some cases, it's part of the process, right? And so, especially because a lot of these guys end up on lousy teams. Right. And if you can thrive and work your way through that, that's gonna benefit you over the course of time if you get past it.
Yeah, John Daigle was on last week, and we were talking about learning your limitations. And that's part of that process for quarterbacks. But look, especially with a quarterback like Justin Fields, where a lot of his special sauce is going to happen outside of structure. I agree that he has to explore and see. I said, you let him drive the car right when he first gets his license, even if he might wreck it. That's how he's going to learn how to drive it.
Yep.
So again, the old ways. I'm not sure. Fantasy football wise, again, this season has made trying to come up with this trenchant. Oh, I'm going to give you the secret to win your league. I don't know. Maybe
I'll give you the secret. I'll give you the secret. Be fast on your feet. Move quickly. Be aggressive. Be assertive. Don't sit there and say, okay. And this is the way I've played fantasy football for now my entire life, which is a long
Yeah.
time, is you sit there and you study, you come up with your theories and you make your projections and you stand by them. And sometimes these guys don't perform well early on. You tend to cling on to them a little bit because, damn it, I know I'm right. And, the other part of that is I'm not right until I'm wrong. And that's not till the end of the season, right? Like, I'm still not wrong about Philip Lindsay being my free square. It's not over yet, right? So,
right.
So, I mean, but I think the people who are going to win going forward, if this level of volatility is what we're going to be playing, are the people who will be the quickest to let go of their own narratives and let go of the things that they assumed, their assumptions and all their presuppositions and all the things that they hold dear, being able. And I've talked about this, since we started doing this, you've got to divorce the name from the numbers. And part of that is getting rid of the emotion and there's an emotional investment when we make in all these players because, man, I knew he was going to be the best. I'm the smartest guy in the room. That's why I picked him. Well, there comes a point where I have to say, guess what? I wasn't the smartest guy in the room. Let me do something to fix it. And the quicker people are going to be to do that, I'm like, I get it. We spend the whole first month of the season. Don't sit your studs. Maybe we need to start thinking about what our studs are.
Yeah.
Right. And then maybe that's really the answer, is just trying to understand and come to grips with who's getting off to a faster start, who faces a different schedule than we expected them to early on. All these things are maybe going to take quicker and more effective analysis on our part as fantasy managers early on.
Yes. Don't sit your studs, but who is a stud from week to week?
Right.
Stretches of the season can change, and the list is probably shorter than you think. It's funny, Bob, when you said make all your projections, do all your research. I thought the next thing you were going to say was and set them on fire. This is the secret. Well, this is the secret, right? Because you do all the work and prepare yourself and think, if this happens, this might happen. This could line up this way. This could negatively impact this player. This could fall apart. This could turn into a super offense. And then you just let it all go so that when the season washes over you, you can pick through and see what the meaningful developments are and act on them maybe a week or two before other people are, because they're still arguing with reality. And like you said, there's an emotional investment. Like you said, Bob, there's an emotional investment. And I think one of the fears, we can come up with a name for this, like a German name for it, fear of a player that you believed in and dropped going off on someone else's roster.
Right.
So you hold on to them because, like, if I let go Trey Sermon and then he finally gets his shot this week because he ends up being the last man standing and runs for 150 yards, then I'm going to feel really terrible. And I don't want that to happen.
Struggle with the fear of missing out, right? I believe the kids call that the FOMO. Right? We do. I mean, you just, like, I know the first time I sit that guy, that's the big game, right? Allen Robinson is still being played on a weekly basis by people because they have a fear of missing that game that they drafted him to have. But also, we can't let go of things that we have seen in the past. Like, we still think Cam Newton is 5 years ago. We still think Josh Gordon is 2013 Josh Gordon somewhere, right? We get so excited when he shows up somewhere. That guy's gone. He does not exist anymore. He's a different thing now. He's evolved. And maybe that's part of what we all need to do, is evolve along with the game. I know it's, every year I try to sit down after the season and do these kind of like, okay, what do I need to change? How can I fix what's broken with my fantasy, right? And what's broken with my fantasy is I tend to count on the people that I invest in early to be everything I invested in them to be, right? And when they're not, I'm slow to pivot. I'm slow to move away. And that's, I think, the biggest thing I need to work on. But it would pay all of us to do exactly what you said. Sift through the ashes of your season when the fire is out, and try to find some little bits and pieces that you can cling on to and build on. And look, this whole thing's a learning process, right? And that's part of the fun of it. I mean, I've been playing for 30 some years now. And every year I come away from this, my first thing is, God, I got to fix this again. But that's kind of part of the fun, right? That's what should be part of the fun anyway, because not every season is going to be fun looking at some of my win-loss records.
Yeah, well, no, to be honest. And this is one of those things that I think about this every week, Bob. I think about saying this every week, and I'm going to say it with you because I feel so comfortable with you, Bob. I'm having the most miserable fantasy football season I have ever had. Really. There's a few of my dynasty teams that are having some good schedule luck and otherwise. I don't want to say smoke and mirrors, but at least I have something to look forward to. But all of those, my redraft teams, all of those expert league teams and things like that, just terrible. I mean, just explosion after explosion, minefield after minefield. But At the same time, like you say, that's what keeps us engaged. And that's where, in some ways, it's the most fun, right? Like in the Dynasty League, when you get your rebuilding project and you start over from the beginning, that's whenever when you're humbled, that's whenever it is the most fun. And hopefully people can stay engaged. Again, like that Derrick Henry thing where in the movie he's saying, you have to go on without me, but you can do it. You can make
Right.
it happen, right? And hey, teams, it's going to be funny, Bob, because teams are going to sneak into the playoffs and win a fantasy football championship. And even the team that wins, the person that wins is going to say, what was this all about, really? You know, like I'm going to win because Dontrell Hilliard became the starter for the Titans, and I picked him up because he was 7th on my waiver wire list, and I didn't have enough money to get anybody else I wanted, and that's why I won a championship. That's how this season could turn out.
I'm just seeing coming up past my screen. Freddie Kitchens will be the play caller for the Giants.
Right,
Oh.
I know. I think it was our good friend Rumford Johnny who said the change is like going from hearing Jason Garrett's going to perform your heart surgery to hearing that Freddie Kitchens is going to perform your heart surgery. Anyway, a couple of more fantasy things, then we'll just go off the rails. I do want to say one thing.
I think we've been off the rails.
Well, we're always off the rails. We live off the rails. And this is the closest we can get to society taming us and giving our talents for something in exchange. Is we'll talk about football, and thankfully we can make that bargain. One thing I do want to say, you can either talk about what I'm going to talk about or talk about something else. Where I do think there's something to get out ahead of a week or two early. Arizona's on bye. Zach Ertz looks great.
He does,
and they're using him creatively in the red zone, and he's performing. And remember, this was a team that last year had a lot of trouble finishing in the red zone. I thought maybe it would be Dan Arnold, right? I mean, that seems like forever ago. Maybe it can be Zach Ertz. In fact, it has been Zach Ertz, and it's going to be even better when Kyler Murray comes back. Wow. How weird was the NFL in Week 11? Colt McCoy had a 300-yard game. So I think in this year that tight end has been so difficult to solve, even Travis Kelce is underperforming expectations. Zach Ertz could end up being a league winner, and he's on bye. And if you're in a dynasty league, for the dynasty players out there, he's exactly the kind of player someone would trade away for like a second or third round pick because they're like, well, I got to get something for him. Right. So that's my tip. You want to talk about Ertz or Cardinals or anything related to that, or just maybe one more nugget before we talk something else?
So I thought about Ertz a little bit this week for the reason. Just looking at the numbers, have been a great run since he's showed up in Arizona. And it's also kind of coincided with health issues for DeAndre Hopkins, right? So it seems to me DeAndre Hopkins hasn't been right for a while, and if this extended break gets him right, I think a lot of people are going to be very disappointed in all these pieces that they were seeing, do other things when DeAndre Hopkins goes back to 10 target a game DeAndre Hopkins. So, but I am in on Ertz. I do think this is a good play. It does seem to be a situation that at least the Cardinals have figured out, and we'll see. I mean, some of it was with Murray, some of it with McCoy. I like what Kyler Murray's done, right? I wish he would run more, right? So but also, I mean, he's evolving in a positive direction as a quarterback, right? He's understanding of the offense, understanding of how the game is played, and the mobility, he's using it a different way instead of just matriculating the ball down the field. He's using it to make bigger plays down the field. And so there's a lot there I like. I'm interested to see what happens when Hopkins is back to full health. I got to say, if we're talking about Arizona, nobody has returned more on my investment given the investment cost than James Conner at this point.
Oh yeah,
and I don't think that's going to change much. I don't think that'll change materially down the stretch. And we say, I think this time every year we talk about running backs that nobody drafted that will win you the title. I think this year we'll be talking more about running backs that you drafted, later, like a team's second running back who ends up being the kind of player that takes you to a championship.
I'd love it with Connor, cancer survivor, and maybe he's got a little more in the tank because they didn't use him like a feature back for the first half of the season, and they're giving him that chance, and he's power. If there's a team in this crazy up and down first 11 weeks that has come out smelling like a rose, it is Arizona. It's a team that knows they can win in a lot of different ways. They can win when their quarterback is hurt. They've suffered some injuries and you wouldn't even know it. And Arizona, the Suns unfortunately didn't come through. Maybe it can be the Cardinals' year. Okay, let's talk about let's go off the rails here. First of all, I don't know if you saw, Bob, the USFL is back.
Yeah.
If I say USFL, what did he talk to me? USFL, what comes to mind?
I'm like, why are they playing football this time of year? That's the first thing that comes to mind. But this is like the retro. All the names are back and all the teams are back.
Logos.
And I mean, I think if you're going to do it, I think that's a cool way to do it. I'm not huge on football at different times of years. I like to work on NFL football.
The autumn wind.
I mean, let's face it, they have turned themselves into a 365-day a year reality show. And I chase that show every one of those days. And so when you throw something else in the water and I have to go look and see what it's all about, it tires me out because I'm old and feeble now. But I'll probably watch a little of it. I honestly, I mean, I hope they bring back the whole, nickname thing and all the guys, and somebody calls himself He Hate Me or
right, XFL stuff.
Yeah, I hope we see all kinds of crazy stuff.
I want to nominate the USFL if anyone's listening, and I know Eric Galco pretty well. I think he's involved with XFL. After that Robert Hunt thing, and I saw that after Myles Gaskin scored, he let Robert Hunt spike the ball. That was so much fun. Offensive, and then we saw a touchdown last night. That's a shame, right? Andrew Thomas. It was the one bright spot for the Giants. Memories of Jumbo Elliott, right, on Monday Night Football. When offensive linemen touch the football, the joy meter goes way up. It goes up for the players. It goes up for the fans. It goes up for the people watching on TV. So this new football in the spring, have something. Someone mentioned when I was talking about this on Twitter, a 3-point conversion if an offensive lineman is your quarterback or something like that. Let's have some fun with this, because when the offensive lineman touch the ball, that's a reason to tune in during the spring. But the USFL is back. And at the very least, Bob, it's part of the whole football umbrella of jobs and keeping the dream alive for players.
And it's
Ernest Johnson,
an additional farm system, right, for the NFL, and I think that's helpful. We've seen it over time with various permutations, and so I'm okay with all that. I don't know how excited I get about a new league. I've had trouble with it since it first started. And they had some big name players.
Mike Rozier was a Heisman winner, went to the Pittsburgh Maulers.
Walker, Young. I mean, there was plenty of things going on. So I don't know. I'm kind of ambivalent towards it. I just like the fact that they like recreated something. I go, oh yeah, I remember those names.
Yeah, it definitely can't really rival the NFL like the original USFL did. I do know, and everyone can go watch the movie Small Potatoes. That was the 30 for 30, the documentary, Who Killed the USFL. So you can go back and familiarize yourself with the history of that league. If you didn't live through it, I was like 8, I think, when it started, and my family talking about, well, we couldn't get Steelers season tickets, but maybe we could get Mauler season tickets. They weren't very good. Yeah, right. So we'll see. There is a team in New Orleans Breakers. So I don't know. Maybe that'll be some. Maybe we, another excuse to have a party in the spring in New Orleans.
All you guys need is another party.
Okay, Bob. I'm gonna do this, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do something I'm gonna kind of cast a spell here. I'm gonna try to speak something into existence, and I'm gonna ask you about this. Okay. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm gonna ask you about this because I always say I need to do the podcast series in the off season, the oral history of fantasy football. Okay. And you are episode 1. You know that, right?
I've been around for a lot of it.
Exactly. But what I want to ask you here right now is if I am speaking this into existence, Bob, who else should I get on the oral history of fantasy football podcast interview series?
Jim Lenz.
Tell me a little bit about the people. Just mention, even if it's
Jim
just like a phrase.
Fantasy Insights. I believe he might have had the first site out there. He called it NFL Fantasy until NFL came and destroyed him. There you go. Because he used the name NFL. And I think there were a handful of us back then. I think you have to include Sam Kaplan, right? Who was back there in the day. I think he's doing mixed martial arts stuff now and doing sales and stuff. Adam Kaplan, his cousin, has gone on, and of leverage that into something. But those people, who else? Joe.
Of course. David. There's Joe and David, people that have been on the couch, like Paul Charchian.
Right. Absolutely. Charch has been here forever. I think, as I look at the list of people on the couch, that would
Matthew Berry.
Big list of it. Berry has been around a long time. All these people, John Hansen, has been around. Hansen jumped in at just 94. So shortly after I got started. So there were a bunch of us, but I think, I think the people who were like in on the super ground floor. You should go back and we should find some of the message board people. I mean, that's really where all this came from, right?
Right.
The alt.rec.sports.fantasy football, where we all just sat there and yelled at each other and called each other's names and many people.
We really haven't come very far, have we?
No,
Bob?
we have not come very far. There's a lot of that, and my employer, Evil Catholic, has been, part of this all along. So there's so many. I mean, I just think you should talk to everybody from each generation.
Sure.
Each era of the form, because I mean, there's been different aspects of this that have come along, right? And so, I mean, I think I was there. It's great being part of the what do you want to call it? Initial wave, or just the rise of the interwebs, right? I mean, it started a little before there was the World Wide Web. I can remember the phone call I got from a subscriber of mine just saying, "Hey, you ever hear of the World Wide Web?" I said, kind of vaguely. Let me tell you about this thing. And he started telling me, I'm going, wait, what?
Yeah.
And, so, I mean, the process of then becoming an expert on the World Wide Web and designing things to work on the web to carry my information and do all these things. There's so much behind it, sitting around on the telephone with David Dodds, for as long as we could stay off the modem to get back to work, but exchanging ideas and trying to figure out how things worked, all these kind of things. It was a great time, back in early 90s. It was just kind of like the Wild West, but
exactly.
But and we just were all kind of forging our way, and I felt like there was a real camaraderie. I mean, I want to say, we're kind of like frenemies, but not really, right? Some of us were more, enemy-ish than, but I mean,
sure.
It was just, I mean, I was out there and I just, the arrogance of thinking I'm so good at this. I'm going to, on my website, I'm going to point to every other person who does this. So everyone can go out and see, oh, wow, that's what they do. I'm going to go back to this guy.
Yeah.
And I mean, I just think there was a lot of that kind of thing going on back then of people, we a great deal of hubris. And, look, I worked for, I don't know how many years. I still use the same joke, but it's still not untrue as, another 20 years in this business, I might break even. Because I mean, I just didn't care. I was so convinced early on, this is going to be the biggest thing ever. And I'm not quitting. You can't make me quit. And Lord knows the world tried to make me quit. So I mean, there's a lot that went on back in those days, and we had a great time. And looking where it's at now, you're just going, oh my God, everything I thought might happen has actually happened. I was like the smartest person ever on earth. If only I figured out a way to cash in on it.
I just want the clip of you saying, I'm the smartest person ever on earth. And I'm going to get that back to Sirius XM so they can be Bob Harris. I'm the smartest person ever on earth. And Mike Dempsey, right? No, it's great. And I love hearing the nostalgia. And like you said, it's the Wild West. Bob, it's like the Wild West, but you can't die of dysentery, right?
No, well,
that's the thing. Right. But the point is, it was like in our lifetime, something happened where it was a frontier that was just sitting there open. And unlike Manifest Destiny, there wasn't anybody on the frontier to, I mean, it was just wide open. You could put your stakes down and say, this is my thing. And if you did that,
there was a point on the internet where it struck me that, we're learning the design and understanding how it all worked. I could look like anything, right?
Yeah.
Like I could look like Microsoft. And I can remember, we winning these, the Lycos top 5% of the web, or, win these awards and stuff, and people, I had like a newspaper call me once and the guy saying, wow, you won this award. And I'm looking at your website and all this stuff. And I mean, what do you got? Like 50 people working there? And I'm sitting there in a puddle of sweat in my underpants going, why should I tell him? Right? Of course. I have 100 people working here, sir. Don't insult me.
That's a great. That's fantastic, Bob. See, now we're getting to the real content. I want to know what other voices you have where you simulate different identities. I want to, what you're doing. If you put the hat on, Bob, right now, you would be like, and it is Albuquerque, right? You'd be the Heisenberg of fantasy football, right? That's exactly with the voice and the cleverness and like you said, you can project anything. I remember the old New Yorker cartoon. I think it was the two dogs, one in front of the computer saying, on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog.
Right.
You know,
Nobody
So-
knows anything.
right.
You're just a thing. I mean, like it can even go back to as far as like, my mom coming to see, and I go, I'm showing her on this computer, this is what I do. And she's like looking at me, she's going, you make computer monitors?
Yeah. Well, so it's good. So it sounds like you're on board, Bob. And I
I'm
think
on
it's
board.
something, and like you said, we can get into different generations of it, and we can get into different seasons. Obviously, there's gonna be way too many people to interview even in one off season. But what I like about it too is, and I just want to ask you, you basically reflected on this already, but I want to just give it a more specific question as we're winding things up. I mean, what strikes you now, especially like you said that you contemplated a lot of this because you really got to be there, Bob? It's like one of those things where the little stand that they set up to like feed the miners is now, McDonald's, that's not really, I'm just making up an example out of thin air. But the point is like just doing that one little thing at the beginning because you did it and you stuck with it over time. And really what it is isn't what you do, Bob. It's that the fantasy football community is a full grown subculture. Bob, you helped create a subculture.
And for some reason, like it attracts incredibly smart people. I think that's the thing that fascinates me to this day. Look, the technology angle of it fascinates me. The way this industry has leveraged technology and stayed on top of it, created technology in many cases, and that other people have been able to use. But just in general, smart people. I mean, not just people who are in the tech background end, but researchers, data scientists. I mean, legal minds, all these people who are really smart and had real jobs and, want to do mine.
How long has it been since you had a real job, Bob?
I can't remember. It's been a long time.
No, I love it because I feel the same way anyway.
It's been a long time. More than 30 years. But that's the thing that I look at now. I mean, I just like, as I sit there in my, tweet deck, things are rolling past me. I'm going, what are all these smart people doing here talking about this thing? That's the most incredible part. And for the most part, they're really great people in addition to that. But just the level of intelligence, the collective group mind is just remarkable. And just, every time I see someone take it another level, take it another step out, what they're doing with the, researching the stats and compiling them and figuring things out. I mean, I'm just going, good Lord, thank God I'm not trying to start this business today.
Yeah, it's like Frank Zappa said he wasn't good enough to be in his own band.
Right, exactly.
And that's how I feel about the fantasy football world.
Yeah,
and you're right.
I would not be doing this today if I was starting today.
I wouldn't either. But there's still amazing, talented people doing amazing, talented things, and we're lucky to be part of it. And I think, by the way, parting note, I think the reason, Bob, that there's so many highly intelligent people it's like those math problems that you can never solve, and you take it on knowing you can never solve it because you can never solve it, because that's what makes it interesting. That's what makes it actually worth your time.
I agree.
What's always worth our time is time with Bob Harris, with all of you wonderful people. It is a time, hopefully, to have blessings you can count, things to be thankful for. We're thankful to not have a real job and get to do things like interact with our friends and talk about things that are interesting with you all, always being part of it. Every year, we say the same thing. We're thankful for that. And we hope we continue to provide something that keeps you coming back, as this has evolved into quite a thing. And I just feel, again, fortunate that y'all, it's weird, Bob. There's not really like elections, but at the same time, by people showing up and caring what we have to say and consuming it, then we get to keep doing it. So we are lucky, and it is the ripples of people like Bob and all those people he mentioned. Look for it this off season, speaking it into existence. Thank you, folks, always for encouraging us to do such things, and always stay classy.